Welcome to Hot Air, Cool People with Dr. Anna Gunz, a podcast devoted to cool professionals with cool ideas for a planet full of hot air. In this episode, Dr. Gunz speaks with Nicole Struthers, a joint PhD and Master of Physical Therapy candidate whose work sits at the intersection of climate change, health, and community resilience.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So before I hear about some of the work you're doing, because I know it's fantastic, I just wanted to ask you, I'm curious about you. You're doing a PhD that's involving nature therapy as well as a physiotherapy degree. So what led you on this path?
So it started in my undergrad. It's a little bit of finding things as I went type of story. So I was originally doing research on cycling without age, which is a social movement where they take long-term care home residents outside on trishaws. So they get the wind in their hair again and get that right back.
Wow.
But they don't have to bike themselves. They don't have to walk. And it takes out the stigma of mobility limitations, as well as it includes intergenerational storytelling. But every time that I would look at feedback from participants from past studies, they were always talking about how they felt happier after coming back from a trishaw ride and how they had the wind in their hair back again. They were able to stop and smell the flowers. And then it got me thinking, well, why are they all coming back happier? And the one common thing was that they're going outside. So that kind of led me to this outdoor sort of area. And I originally wanted to look at how this could be used in critical care PT. So we're talking about people who can't physically or even mentally make it outside or walk around on their own. And then this would be a way of getting them that social exposure as well as going outside. But there's no mobility device. So an able-bodied person and someone who has some limitations could both be sitting in this trishaw and no one would ever know the difference. So it started off in that kind of realm of getting people outside who can't necessarily go outside by themselves. And then I somehow wandered into completely changing it to a nature prescription for knee osteoarthritis, which is a completely different direction. But that's kind of where it started, was about 4 years back with Cycling Without Age, which is a Danish social movement.
That's incredible. I've not heard of that, but it makes complete sense. I think that's part of the curiosity I have with this as well. It's, leading into nature prescriptions. And you and I have had this conversation, in terms of, there's work about the dose and frequency and whether, what is it actually in us, in our animal selves that's creating this benefit? Because some of the literature is absolutely fascinating. Could you tell us a little bit? I almost feel like it's a good time to jump into your study, actually. Could you tell us a little bit about the work that you just finished and published? And I'd love to hear a little bit about what you think that means to you and the literature and how you're sort of, how your journey in sort of understanding this nature relationship and prescriptions is headed based on this.
So I might actually take a different approach to answering that question. So we're going to start with the end goal. The very start of my PhD, my supervisor, Alexandra Zechevich, she sat me down and asked, what is my ultimate dream end goal of my 5 years? And the vision that we had was prescription book of medication that you see in your family physician's office. I wanted that, but for nature therapy. So what works best for what people and what are the benefits? So that anyone could pick up this book, flip through and say, for people with hypertension, this is what they should do in terms of nature-based interventions. And kind of had to start somewhere. So I had this big idea of doing a very complicated meta-analysis and systematic review to find the effects of any kind of nature-based intervention specific to a physical health condition. So instead of doing a subgroup analysis, I took that approach right from the get-go. And then I recruited you onto that paper to help out with that kind of side of things. So that's kind of the goal for that paper, was to set the foundation of what should be done and what are the benefits. So while it didn't look at, if we didn't do any subgroup analyses on different types of interventions and like the features with them, but we were able to just kind of stratify my health condition. So it's the start. More work does need to be done. There's not a lot of randomized control trials out there in terms of nature-based intervention. So the literature has to catch up. But yeah, and we found 4 significant outcomes across 3 different health condition family groups. That every meta-analysis was kind of leaning in favor of nature. And there's fairly large effect sizes. So I have full confidence that in 5-10 years, when I rerun the study, there'll be a lot more strong evidence that can synthesize and put out there. But
what are the findings then? Like, what did you take away from it?
So throughout the process, we searched 5 different databases to collect randomized controlled trials on nature-based interventions that were in a population that had a physical health condition. So this had to be something that wasn't necessarily like a risk for high blood pressure. They had to have diagnosed high blood pressure. So with this, after we screened 20,000 studies, we found 26 that were able to be included, and only 15 were able to be in the meta-analysis just because of limitations of comparable data. So for the significant improvements, they were found in diastolic blood pressure and heart rate for people with cardiovascular conditions. So this would include hypertension. There was also a improvement in fatigue for people with central nervous system conditions. If I'm recalling correctly, it was on people who have fibromyalgia and post-stroke. And then the last one that had significant improvements was body fat percentage in people with endocrine conditions. So this would include overweight, obesity, and type 1 diabetes.
That's really interesting. So essentially, people with these illnesses and chronic illnesses, and I think that fatigue in chronic illnesses, that was really interesting to me because it's a really difficult symptom. It's really hard for quality of life. And just simply having a nature intervention compared to usual care had some significance or trend towards significance. Because from my recollection too, there was also trends towards significance, but it might not have reached criteria from a randomized control trial piece. So, when we see that in an RCT, the question is it because it's really not, or is it just the way we're measuring it or something about the study or the sample? And how would is it, it's showing a trend. Is there a way that we could maximize it, or is it what it is? And that's fascinating. What kind of interventions in nature were they? Was this people going out in the middle of nowhere and meditating under a mountain? What kinds of things were used in these trials?
It was really varied. Again, we weren't able to do a subgroup analysis for intervention type, so we kept it really open and just included everything that had some intentionality with nature. So it included walking in an urban park versus just an urban street area. So thinking of walking around Riverdale Park versus walking down Yonge and Bloor. And then there was also ones where they would have a designated nature area. So one was about a rehab facility that had a trail that they could walk in their gardens. There was also week-long forest bathing retreats. There was mountain hiking. It was really varied. There wasn't just kind of meditating in a specific forest as well. I think the coolest one that I think would be the most applicable to anyone and everyone globally, really, is one that was called the EcoFit app. So it used local data to tell you where the parks were, and it provided trails that you could walk. So then everyone in that trial used this app, and then they went on nature walks, and it was self-directed and gave some autonomy to that. So I really liked that intervention kind of side of things where you are giving that participant the autonomy to choose what they're doing. It's more of a pragmatic trial design. And then there were ones that were super tightly controlled where there was set times for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and times where they'd be walking in a forest versus meditating in a forest versus just socializing in a forest. So yeah, there was different types of nature-based interventions. A lot of the time they were comparing them to usual care or an urban alternative. So for example, the one that was a forest bathing stay, the alternative was an urban hotel. There was just some that were normal usual care where they didn't change anything in that participant's lifestyle. And then there was one that I thought was a very interesting comparison. So it had 3 groups in the trial, and one was usual care, one was the Mediterranean diet, and then the third group was the Mediterranean diet plus forest bathing. And so for the purpose of our paper, we compared the diet and diet plus forest bathing, and we still found that significant benefit on certain outcomes that the trial reported. So there's already a benefit from having a well-rounded, healthy diet, but this is showing that nature is another added thing to a pillar of health.
It's incredible. And do we know why it works?
There's some theories. It's in terms of like the literature and conceptual kind of models of why things would work. There's no one set confirmed pathway. There's a few proposed ones for something like pain, where it could be the microbiome exposure. It could be the social side of doing a nature-based intervention. It could just be being physically active outdoors makes you want to go further a little bit more. It kind of engages with that curiosity that people have. But there's no confirmation really of any theories. Again, it's a very young field, especially when you're narrowing it down to physical health conditions. So it'll take some time before any pathways are kind of confirmed. My personal favorite one is the social side of things, because I think that's what really lacks in a lot of exercise trials as well as physical activity promotion. Because again, when you're walking in a park, you're most likely either going to see someone, you're going to see an animal, or you're going to interact with your surroundings. It's still some form of socialization that you might not get if you're walking on a treadmill in your house or at a gym. So that's my own personal kind of idea, is that it's partly social, but in terms of the actual confirmed pathways, I don't think, to my recollection, there's no rigorously proved one. But
yeah, I mean, I think you said it's a very new field, but it's also, I think, a very old one. In terms of a lot of people, it's reconnecting to culture and recognizing as well in Indigenous knowledge systems, land-based healing is land-based healing. It's we are connected to our environment and each other and all life in the middle of it. So this is what I find so fascinating about all of this is it's almost like a coming home. And you were at the Imagineering we had. So a number of months ago, we had big community convening in London, Ontario, with clinicians and researchers and community providers. And there was as well the program that we have at the hospital this spring from is our land-based healing nature for healing program, which is led by Nicole who's the Indigenous youth wellness consultant that we work with. And there was members of Indigenous communities as well, including Dylan White, who really was inspiring in terms of setting me off and this pathway in Beaulieu, who is phenomenal. And there was one of the comments was, yes, from one of the knowledge keepers was she said, yeah, maybe this is it's she said, it's so funny listening. It's almost like coming home, like people are finally catching up to what we've been saying and what we're living and what is I'm going to paraphrase now, but something around, what is our reality and truth. But I think there's something so beautiful about that. And, that's one piece that I reflect on. And I think the other thing that you said that I thought was really interesting is that you think it's about the social piece. And that's an area of literature that's exploding in terms of, people who have access to green space feel more socially connected, even when they're not. And how this is coming at a time, in the literature when we also are seeing loneliness as being declared a public health emergency and threat. And we're starting to understand. It's like, again, all of this coming back to the fact that we're animals and we exist with others, even, and others being ourselves too. Like we're connecting with ourselves and nature more deeply, as well as others being all of the life that is on the planet. So I think it's just an interesting synergy. And this is also what we heard from our youth advisory groups at from our youth group that we work with who have an illness experience. And they basically spew out the nature literature without us even, prompting. And this whole conversation about feeling isolated and claustrophobic and alone when they don't have access to nature, even a view, and how this can help with their healing. Other people might not even their family might not understand it. It's just a really fascinating.
You're actually brought up a great point. Loneliness is one of the benefits of nature-based interventions, as well as improving social cohesion and connection. So you touched on a really important point there, especially with population aging. And we do have a very significant portion of the population who at one point will most likely experience loneliness, just given the current state of long-term care, as well as discrimination that's faced against older adults. But I did want to touch on Indigenous knowledge and how the evidence being built on nature-based interventions, land-based healing and all that, it's all going to support prioritization of the right to Indigenous self-determination and reconciliation within healthcare systems and services. And I think it's important that this academic discourse gets built so then that evidence is there and more clinicians, policymakers, administration, they start to realize that historically there's been the ongoing effects of colonialism, and Indigenous ways of healing and knowing have been discriminated against within current systems. And this is just getting evidence saying that here's some numbers that, Western healthcare loves. So I think it is going to play an important role in really, really highlighting the importance and making progress on reconciliation, especially in Canada's system.
Yeah, so you're saying legitimizing Indigenous knowledge. That's where I feel like so much scientific literature really just legitimizes things that have been known and said for thousands of years. And it's sad to me that we need this. But, I even know in my relationship itself, like always needing to be outside in this feeling of not really knowing why, somehow seeing the literature in my Western brain, as was pointed out to me by my Indigenous friend, like, why didn't we need this literature? And I was like, yeah. But in my brain, it gave me almost more, the way that the paradigm and the scientific paradigm grown up, and it gave me almost more legitimacy in my head to pursue these things. And it's sad, but it's a reality. So yeah, one can see it can be a Western tool to legitimize this. But yes, self-determination and autonomy shouldn't aid this, but I appreciate, what you're saying in terms of maybe it will help from the other side. And I do think that it's also, I do wonder as people sort of have these experiences and recognize this in themselves, if it helps them unravel. I almost think of it as maybe instead of legitimizing, it's more about us. What does decolonization mean? And us colonizing ourselves. Even that paradigm that I just spoke of, like, why do I need this literature to legitimize what in my body and bones I know to be true? Like, that is me decolonizing myself as opposed to it having an impact on anyone else. And I think that maybe is the trend, it might as a side effect legitimize, but I think it's more important that we're decolonizing our system and our health systems and other things to help people understand how important this autonomy is, and also understand, you can say, oh, there are different knowledge systems and we need to respect them, even though there's a lot of huge scientific agencies that don't actually have a statement to recognize Indigenous knowledge systems. And it's like, curiously, I've met scientists as well who are like, oh yes, but we need to prove that. But there's so many limits to our RCTs and methods and other things. And there's so much relational knowledge that has benefit and is really important, which is also what science is struggling with now. Like, how do we deal with all of these different moving parts and relationality when that is the truth and the importance of Indigenous knowledge systems? And people can say it academically, but I wonder if this experience of people self-connecting, this dialogue around nature, can help them decolonize themselves and maybe challenge their own scientific paradigms. I don't know. That's me pontificating, but I know personally, to me, like on my journey to really understand what colonization is and what decolonization means and how personal it is, this has been a very helpful tool, or even to have this conversation with other people who are focused on more of a, at a different level or a lack of understanding, who might say, oh yes, I'm a open-minded decolonized mindset, but then realize really actually how embedded we all are in the system and how we think and feel and how we address our health and family and other things as well.
And that's just it, is that evidence and how we grade it in terms of quality is very much westernized. It's really embodying what the ivory tower is. It's not including historically. We know that people of color haven't been included in trials. We know that females weren't included. We know that gender differences often aren't even looked at. They'll only look at sex differences, but we know that there is more to health and wellness than chromosomes.
Pregnant women?
Yeah.
And a lot of children and youth.
Everyone but white males has been very much left out of science. And even I want to say it wasn't too long ago when it was a requirement to even say the sex of a cell. If you're doing lab bench work, you could have just said that it was a cell. You didn't actually have to look or even declare if it was a female or male cell. And that does have an impact on results from like that hard bench science perspective. But when you're talking about people and their experience with healing of any kind, so even if you're doing something like you're doing a drug trial and one of the side effects is, let's just say, grogginess, and you kind of feel lethargic and tired, the stigma that will come out from experiencing that symptom of a male versus a female and any different gender presentation, that's going to have an impact on the quality of life of that participant who's undergoing that trial. And that typically isn't actually looked at or talked about. And I think an important part of this nature-based research and land healing is bringing in those other historically left out perspectives. This knowledge isn't anything new. It's just the Western world getting that confirmation that they want, that they need to do something that has been left out, which is very, very disappointing, especially when you think about science as the stuff that's, at the end of the day, it's guiding your life. It's the things that inform policy changes, things that inform best practice. But something can't be a best practice if it's leaving out 75% of the population in the world because they've been discriminated against in research. So I think that's kind of where this really has a potential to start tackling the kind of social disparity side of health intervention research, especially when we're talking about chronic conditions. And certain conditions, you're more likely to experience them where there's a higher prevalence in marginalized groups. And those are groups that typically have been excluded from research because they may not have access to a university to be a participant. They may not have a university even near them to participate. So by doing something like a nature-based intervention trial, we can now bring people who do have systemic inequities, and you're allowing them into this space. You're allowing them to do their part to benefit their community's health. And they're not doing it for the white man who can afford everything. They're doing it for themselves. They're doing it for their culture, their people, and they can bring in their historical knowledge and their family knowledge and all of that and bring it into their healing. And it makes me very hopeful to see that research is starting to go that way with conversations and work being done on what could be considered traditional and cultural healing. But I think even, it sounds so cliche, but it should just be called, like, recognized as healing in general. It shouldn't be different than meeting a physical activity guideline. It shouldn't be different than drinking enough water every day. It should just be part of health.
Yeah, I think too, the other piece is how much damage medical research and interventions has done to certain groups and to extreme harm without consent. So there are people who will not want to participate in clinical trials or academic research as it is because of the, concern and the damage and very well-earned suspicion. Mm-hmm. And I think that I'm not even sure, nature, do we need an RCT for it? Understanding and recognizing and supporting other knowledge systems that exist and other ways of knowing, all this is doing is supporting that. So it'll be very important to highlight narratives and other art pieces and supporting researchers or people who are pursuing research within their own community and their own representing their culture and their ways of knowing, this will hopefully amplify that knowledge and in this. And the other thing I really appreciate about what you're saying is the word that you're using a lot is healing. And that's actually not used a lot in healthcare. As one of my friends who is a healer talks about, I remember once he referred to me as a healer, and I was like, what? Because it's not there. And I was just even, as I talk to residents and medical trainees, that's something that I really want to understand better is what healing is. And when we talk about research, their clinical outcomes, and it's not about healing, it's about either improving something or decreasing illness. And when we talk about rehab, we're talking about rehab, but we're not talking about healing. And I had a colleague who was saying, well, I think because we're trying to promote nature prescriptions for everybody, for our families, caregivers, and our patients, saying, well, I think this is good for other people. And I think by that they meant like other professionals maybe. And I was like, really? I'm going to challenge that. Do we really know what's happening inside these patients while they're in an ICU bed, while they're sedated? And we do these trials in ICU about like what medications might improve or decrease delirium, this confusion that people can have, or improve the cognitive outcomes or cause less harm, from a cognitive perspective to these patients. And we don't talk. And then there's studies that sort of explore family experience. I have been in that beside the bed. I have been in hospital beds. I have been a caregiver. I've been a person. I am a mother. I'm a daughter, but also as a physician for so many years and seeing so many families and hearing so many stories, and, what I have lived in my body through the cumulative lives that I've been intertwined with. And, healing is so important, and these intangible things, that's what's important to people. It's important to all of us. And I love that you use the term and you're fighting this, because healing is something that I think a lot of us don't understand. In the healthcare profession, we don't talk about. And that's what this work you're doing is. It's not just about rehabilitation and quality of life, it's healing. So I love that. So healing ourselves, healing the planet.
I use the term healing rather than health because health is something it's something you achieve, right? But healing is a process that you go through. Same with rehabilitation. So health might be the end goal, but rehab is a process that you're going through. But nothing is in isolation. So healing is more of a holistic kind of approach in terms of terminology, but it sort of started off with when I was volunteering at a physiotherapy clinic. It was a knee osteoarthritis group exercise and education program. And whenever I'd ask the clients what they were up to this week and just chat with them and kind of socialize with them and get that rapport building, it was never things like their knee hurt a little bit less or they could walk an extra 10 minutes. It was that they were able to play in the park with their grandkids. They were able to sit on their knees and garden for an hour, and they haven't done that in years because it's hurt. One client, they walked around the mall with their friends for the first time in years. And it's something that's so small that you don't really think about as being a privilege, but that's healing. So not only were they improving physically from the condition that they're experiencing, they're getting that social health. Their mental health is improving. They're getting their confidence back. And seeing that, it also comes off on you. And then you as an individual are also healing. So if you have worries or doubts about your ability and whether or not this is something you should do in your life, this is healing your own mind and your own. It's healing what you didn't know needed to be healed while you're helping someone else. I think that's actually perfect. So healing is side by side with helping. You're not providing something, you're helping someone with something. It's all partnership. You're not this in terms of physios. You're not a physiotherapist who's the be-all, know-all kind of person. You're working with your client. You're going with things that are meaningful to them. You're learning about them and their life experiences. And you're part of that pivotal point where they've been in pain for years. They haven't been able to do the things that they've loved. And you're helping them get that back. And that's healing. So you're not just, can't necessarily reverse the condition, but you're helping them feel more alive. You're giving that back to them. I think that's kind of where the term healing came up for me is that I prefer that over health, because it's more than just the absence of disease and infirmity, and it's an overall state of well-being. It's a little bit more. It's multiple people working together and helping each other to reach things that they didn't know needed to be healed. That was a very big tangent, but
no, it's not a tangent. I think it's important. It's emotional, spiritual, physical, mental health. We compartmentalize them all, but isn't that what makes us and what we all at different parts in our lives? When something's missing, we're not well. Thank you. It was really wonderful to sit and chat with you today, Nicole. I learned a lot. I always appreciate talking to you. And I think one of the things that I have come to know about you is that, there's this very academic side of you, and you're very good at working, getting things done, but also sitting back and reflecting. And I know that what you were talking about in terms of, kind of redefining research and knowledge and evidence that actually includes a narrative and traditional knowledge is actually something that you're very passionate about and writing about, because we do need to rethink about this grading system that we do to grade RCTs, because it's not encompassing of these other ways of knowing. And so I really appreciate that about you. And I think that's wonderful. And I'm so excited that you said you're going to repeat this in 5 to 10 years. Because for me, as one of your fans, that means you're going to stick with this and stay in this area as you grow. So thank you for the work you're doing. And I always ask the same question at the end, which is, what gives you hope?
I was actually thinking about this not that long ago, but off the top of my head, I don't think I can think of a single global issue that's as interdisciplinary as planetary health and trying to face the challenge of climate change. You have people from economics taking on that side of thing, working with health researchers and health professionals. You have ecologists, botanists, they're all coming together. And it's truly everyone as a united front trying to do something to help. And there's not even a lot of competition. Everyone's kind of supporting each other in it. And you can meet such incredible people and have discussions where no one's bashing an idea. You're just building and making a ladder off of each other. And you have these grassroots movements where it might be a municipality has a local conservation group that does activities every week. And then they're going up to, in Canada's case, a provincial group where it could be the Ontario nurses are all coming together to bring environment and sustainability in their education and practice. And then you have national scale movements like the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. You have parks with BC Parks Foundation. You have these big national movements they started off as a couple people with an idea, and then they keep scaling up and getting bigger. And then you go really zoomed out and you have international groups. You have my personal one that I work with is the Environmental Physiotherapy Association. So they're working with institutions, research, clinical practice around the world to bring any kind of environmental perspectives into those domains. And it's really cool to see everyone coming together in this way where it truly is interdisciplinary. Everyone has a shared goal. No one's competing. It's just, that gives me hope. So even though you hear about increases in forest fire rates, you hear about, I think it was the other day, it was the hottest recorded day ever that humans started recording time and temperature in a very westernized way. So that's that disclaimer there about that day. I don't think it's actually the hottest ever. It's the hottest that science has recorded. But despite all of that, you still have everyone from every walk of life, from every discipline, from every profession coming together, trying to do something. So even if a million things are developed, are implemented, are evaluated, if none of them work, maybe the 1,000,001 will. That extra one where it just goes a little bit further, it leads on someone's knowledge a little bit more as things kind of build on each other in terms of disciplinary approaches, methods, interdisciplinary evidence, pathways of knowing and everything, once it starts accumulating, we'll get closer and closer to actually having a tangible, effective way of working towards planetary health. And it's still going to require everyone doing their part, but it's a little bit more clear of how to do it. We have more and more people agreeing to do it, coming onto the movement. Yeah, at the end of the day, that's what gives me hope, is seeing everyone come together for this one common challenge. And it's not combative. Everyone is supporting each other and doing what they can in their capacity to kind of address global health and wellness in the 21st century, in the context that we live on our planet Earth and we have to take care of it while it takes care of us. Yeah,
I love that. It's connecting with humanity is actually connecting with our animal selves and each other and bringing together. It's a very positive space to be in as well. I love it. Exactly as you said, it's just working with really positive people and everybody, everything that anyone is doing in any sphere that is about bringing equity and justice and love and community and peace and mental health, and all of it matters and all of it builds. I love that. Thank you, Nicole. Thanks for your time today. This was wonderful. Oh my gosh, there's so much in this. I'm so excited.
Thanks for listening to Hot Air, Cool People with Dr. Anna Gunz. Special thanks to our guest, Nicole Struthers, and the Climate Change, Environment, and Health production team. This episode was produced by Jakob Wilk and Mariah Peters and managed by Danielle Pineda, Olivia Brooks, and Amaan Thawer. Show artwork was created by Laney Beaulieu. Details and links are in the episode notes. Until next time.